Hi, my name is Miles. I'm 32 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I would have bet my entire 401k that my marriage was rock solid. I'm talking Sunday pancakes, shared toothbrush charger, can recite each other's coffee order kind of solid. If you've ever felt that steady everyday contentment, the warm hum in the background of life, you'll get the picture. And because I know every relationship has its own surprises, drop a quick note below. What's the biggest curveball your partner has ever thrown at you? I'm genuinely curious how my story compares. Serena and I met when I was finishing my mechanical engineering degree, and she was knee-deep in psychology textbooks. Picture a campus volunteer build site, sawdust floating through autumn sun, power drills whining, and there's this woman with a crooked grin balancing a beam twice her size. That mix of fierce determination and joy grabbed my attention like a clamp on a workbench. Coffee turned into study sessions turned into late-night drives, and before long we were stacking IKEA bookcases in the starter condo we thought was the peak of adulthood. Jump ahead 6 years of marriage. We traded the condo for a tidy split level outside Cedar Ridge, Illinois. Nothing fancy, just a yard big enough for grilling and an unfinished basement I kept promising to convert into a game room. I handled product design at a mid-sized firm. She'd launched her own therapy practice with an emphasis on family counseling. I joked that she analyzed feelings for a living while I calculated gear ratios, and somehow that balance worked. We shared morning coffee at the breakfast bar, swapped memes over lunch breaks, and declared every other Friday sacred date night. Sometimes steakhouse splurges, sometimes pajama-clad Netflix divies with popcorn for dinner. Were we perfect? Not even close. I leave socks in weird places, and Serena cannot remember to fill the gas tank before the warning light. But we'd weathered layoffs, a failed IVF cycle, and a hailstorm that totaled my truck without losing that instinct to reach for each other's hand. So the Tuesday night it all detonated, I had zero defenses up. I'd settled onto the sectional with a preseason basketball game droning as background noise, waiting for my online match to finish updating. Serena walked in wearing yoga pants and that oversized college hoodie I love, basically the international signal for chill evening ahead. Instead, she crossed her arms, planted herself between me and the TV, and said the 4 words every spouse dreads: "We need to talk." Funny how quickly your brain flips through potential crimes in that moment. Missed anniversary, unpaid bill, the soggy towel I left on the hardwood floor. I muted the TV. Sure, what's up? She inhaled like she was about to free dive and let it out in one practice sentence. I believe we should remove physical intimacy from our relationship for at least 6 months, so we can deepen our emotional connection. I laughed, not a mocking cackle, more a reflexive "are you kidding me" chuckle. Serena didn't blink, my grin faded. Wait, you're serious? Her eyes, normally moss green, now the color of storm clouds, fixed on mine. I've been researching how couples rely on sex as a crutch, and I think we're stuck in that pattern. Here, where you pause and ask yourself, if your partner suddenly suggested celibacy, how would you react? Because my thoughts did a pileup on the mental interstate. First came confusion, had I missed signs she was unhappy? Then guilt, is this because I skipped last Thursday's date night to finish a project? And finally indignation, who decides unilaterally to bench the entire physical side of marriage? I tried logic. Serena, we're not exactly rabbits, but we're healthy. Why cut off something that brings us closer? She launched into phrases I'd never heard her use: patriarchal conditioning, reclaiming bodily autonomy, energetic boundaries. It sounded less like my wife and more like a trending podcast transcript. I caught the name Arden Reeves, apparently a feminine awakening guide, and something called the Awakened Feminine Circle. My stomach tightened. I won't drag you through every volley of that conversation, but picture 2 people on parallel tracks, shouting across a canyon neither realized had opened. I asked if she felt neglected. She insisted intimacy masked deeper issues. I pointed out how we'd always solved problems by talking them through. She accused me of fearing growth. By the end I was hoarse, she was glassy-eyed, and neither of us had moved an inch. When she finally retreated to our bedroom, my bedroom too, though it suddenly felt foreign, I stared at the blank TV screen reflecting my own stunned face. A tiny, ridiculous detail lodged in my brain. Somewhere during the argument, my game had finished downloading. I'd been thrilled an hour earlier, now I couldn't remember why it mattered. Funny how crisis shrinks your world. The following morning, Serena breezed past me in the hallway wearing a tailored blazer I'd never seen and a sleek bob where her long waves used to fall. She kissed the air near my cheek like European acquaintances do and drove off before I could latch onto a single coherent question. In the quiet kitchen, her untouched coffee steamed beside mine. I poured both cups down the sink, watched the swirls disappear, and wondered if that was a metaphor I'd rather ignore. Over the next few days, the distance grew measurable. She spent evenings in the study, headphones on, notebook filling rapidly with color-coded annotations. Our shared shows sat in the queue untouched. She skipped Saturday brunch with our friends, citing a women's empowerment webinar, and came home late smelling like sandalwood and sage. Each time I asked what was happening, she'd offer a tight smile. "I'm evolving, Miles. Give me space." Space? I'd gladly hand her Mars if it meant clarity. Here, where a storytelling coach would urge a cliffhanger, but real life just drags you through slow-motion confusion. I found myself replaying our years together, searching for hidden cracks. The argument about holiday travel, the time she rolled her eyes when I bought vintage comic prints, the way she once sighed when I suggested kids could wait another year. Had those moments been signposts I missed? If you've ever doubted your own memories after someone rewrites the narrative, raise your hand in the comments. Seriously, let's crowdsource some sanity. The first unmistakable lesson hit me that Sunday night. Assumptions kill communication. I'd assumed Serena and I shared the same definition of marriage. She was now following an entirely different playbook, one written by influencers who'd never met us. That realization hurt more than the proposed celibacy. Because physical connection can be renegotiated, but shared reality, once that fractures, every conversation turns to fog. Still, stubborn hope clung to me like static. Maybe this was a phase. Maybe she'd snap out of it once she saw how much it hurt me. So I set the table Monday evening, her favorite salmon, asparagus, garlic, mashed potatoes. Candlelight even. She arrived home late, glanced at the spread, and said she'd already eaten with Circle Sisters. My heart dropped into the mashed potatoes, and I barely tasted a bite. That night, lying side by side in darkness, I tried one last gentle push. "I love you, Serena. Whatever's bothering you, we can tackle it together, but please don't shut me out." She answered without turning. "This work is something I have to do alone. You wouldn't understand. You're not a woman." There it was, the invisible wall she'd built, bricks stamped with ideology I'd never subscribed to, mortared by strangers online. We both fell silent, but our thoughts must have roared louder than any argument. I remember staring at the ceiling, tracing shadows from the streetlight, and realizing that for the first time since we'd said, "I do," I didn't feel welcome in my own bed. If you're still with me, here's a question I wrestled with until dawn. At what point does patience become self-betrayal? People grow, we're supposed to, but how far can one partner sprint ahead before the bond snaps? Drop your take below. Your insights might help someone on the brink. Morning arrived, bringing a light rain that tapped the window like a metronome. Serena had already left, a streak of taillights disappearing down the wet street. I brewed coffee, only one mug this time, and stared at the wedding photo on our fridge. Two 20-somethings grinning under string lights, faces flushed with laughter and champagne. I touched the edge of the frame and felt a surge of grief so sudden it stole my breath. Because that photo wasn't ancient history, it was a promise we'd both made. And promises, I'd always believed, were sacred. That day at work, CAD models blurred. My mind kept drifting to phrases Serena had used. Energetic sovereignty, patriarchal gaze, male entitlement. They sounded lifted from a thesis, not the woman who once spent an entire Saturday learning Mario Kart shortcuts to impress me. I couldn't decide if I was angry, scared, or embarrassed, probably all three. I wish I could tell you I marched home that night and fixed everything with a heartfelt speech. Instead, I walked in to find Serena hosting 5 strangers seated on meditation cushions in our living room, candles flickering, sage smoke curling toward the ceiling fan. The women chanted something about ancestral wounds while my allergy-prone sinuses begged for mercy. Serena shot me a look both apologetic and defiant, as if to say, "This is who I am now. Deal with it." I retreated to the garage, slid into the driver's seat of my Camry, and let the rain drum on the roof while I stared through the windshield at nothing. That's when the next lesson crystallized. Love without honesty is hospice care. It keeps a relationship breathing, but it's not living. And I realized I had a decision to make, though I wasn't ready to face it yet. I'm stopping here for now because the story only gets wilder, but let me leave you with this takeaway. When someone drops a bomb on your relationship, pay attention not just to the explosion, but to the silence that follows. The echoes tell you which foundations cracked and which still stand. Trust those echoes. They're honest, even when people are. So have you ever heard a sentence that rewired your life in an instant? Share it below, and let's see how many of us are walking around with similar scars. I'll be back soon to tell you what happened when I finally dug into the source of Serena's evolution, and why walking away sometimes takes more love than staying put. The scent of smoldering sage lingered in our house for 2 straight days after that first women's circle, clinging to curtains and creeping into my work shirts like a stubborn ghost. Serena claimed the smoke cleared patriarchal residue. All it did for me was ignite allergies and a crawling sense that I was no longer welcome in my own home. By Wednesday, she'd scheduled a second gathering, this time announcing it in a group text to me, and weirdly, our neighborhood association so the sisters wouldn't have parking issues. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over a polite objection, then shoved the device in my pocket. What was I going to say? Please don't exorcise imaginary sexism in my living room. That week, every routine we had evaporated. Serena stopped joining me for morning coffee, insisting she had to journal sunrise intentions on the patio. She swapped our Friday date night for something called a goddess alignment webinar. I tried to meet her halfway, asked if she wanted me to cook vegetarian to match her new anti-animal aggression frequency diet, but she waved me off. Nourish yourself however resonates with your masculine journey, she said, eyes already glued to her laptop. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I defaulted to leftover pizza. Money was the first hard metric that something bigger than a mood swing was underway. One slow afternoon at the office, I logged into our joint account to pay the Visa bill and nearly spit coffee onto my keyboard. 3 transactions, each $425, labeled OCFEM Circle Online. 2 smaller ones, $89 and $129, billed as ARCNIUM Media. My engineer brain does quick math. Over $1,100 gone in 10 days. I double-checked for fraud, but the charges weren't flagged. That meant Serena had entered our card number willingly. For anyone who stumbled over an unexpected charge from your partner, you know the gut punch. Your stomach drops first, then your mind races. Is this temporary? Is this betrayal? Somewhere in that tornado of feelings, a brutally practical question emerges. How many more hits can the budget take? Tell me in the comments if you've ever faced that moment, because I suddenly felt naive about every direct deposit paycheck that had ever sailed into our shared ledger. That night I approached her gently. Hey, noticed some new charges, just wanted to check they're legit. She didn't even look up from her phone. They're sorority-level membership fees necessary for my awakening path. She said it the way someone might mention renewing a magazine subscription. My voice stayed level, but my pulse thudded in my ears. We usually okay big expenses together. She tucked hair behind her ear, hair that was now razor straight and glossy as if she'd stepped out of a Dyson commercial, and said, "This is an investment in both of us. You'll benefit when I'm fully aligned." Translation, end of discussion. By then she'd set her phone to silent, but only for me. I'd watch it glow face down beside her plate while we ate, see her thumb the power button for a quick peek, then slide the device back as though I hadn't noticed. Password changed. Icon badges cleared. She'd never hidden tech from me before. Suddenly her screen might as well have been Fort Knox. One Thursday after midnight, I pretended to sleep, eyes cracked just enough to spot the pale rectangle of light as she scrolled. A smile tugged at her lips, the kind I used to earn with dumb jokes. She tapped out a message, waited, and moments later another grin. My heartbeat pounded louder than the ceiling fan. I remember asking myself, right there in the dark, whether emotional betrayal feels worse than a physical affair. What do you think? The new vocabulary kept multiplying. At breakfast, she'd announce, Arden says dispelling gendered guilt begins with repatterning somatic scripts. Driving to the grocery store, she asked if I'd examine my shadow projections around female sovereignty. It was like living with an AI trained on therapy buzzwords and Tumblr threads. The practical, witty Serena who once quoted Parks and Rec was gone. In her place stood a walking glossary of spiritual feminist jargon. And yet every so often I caught the old her, an absent-minded hum while folding laundry, a quick smirk at my terrible dad joke. Those flickers hurt the worst, because they reminded me what I was losing. The second women's gathering happened on a rainy Saturday. I escaped to the hardware store under the guise of buying drywall anchors, anything to avoid chanting strangers. When I got back, 6 pairs of Birkenstocks lined our entryway and flute music drifted from the living room. I slipped past the closed door toward the kitchen for a beer. Over the soft melody, I heard Arden's voice piped through a Bluetooth speaker. Smooth, low, hypnotic. She spoke about detaching from male energy drains, while the women murmured yes, yes like a choir. My hand tightened around the bottle cap. Minutes later, muffled sobs erupted, followed by applause. I felt like an intruder in an emotional seance, except the ghosts they were banishing sounded suspiciously like husbands. After the circle dispersed, Serena floated into the kitchen glowing. "How was your outing?" she asked, as though nothing monumental had happened. "Educational," I answered, trying to keep sarcasm holstered. "Yours?" she smiled beatifically. "Transformative. We performed a cord cutting. I released lingering expectations about wifely duties." I swallowed hard, forcing a nod. Inside, a clock ticked down to something irreversible. The breaking point arrived courtesy of 2 forgotten inches of laptop screen. Tuesday morning, Serena rushed out, leaving her MacBook open on the coffee table, lit ajar just enough to prevent sleep mode. I swear I hesitated, a full ethical pause, but curiosity and fear teamed up. I slid into the couch and tapped the spacebar. Her inbox glowed. No password prompt. One unread email from Arden Reeves, Circle Mother Vision. Subject line: "Tonight's sacred strategy for sovereignty dizzy." I clicked. "Beloved Serena, your bravery in asserting a 6-month celibacy boundary is a radiant model for the collective. Remember, every tear from an unawakened partner validates the work. If guilt arises, repeat our mantra: his discomfort is not my burden. Also, our advanced luminous ascension tier opens next week. Only for sisters committed to full financial energetic exchange, $997. Space is limited. Let me know if you're ready to elevate. In fierce love, Arden." I felt the room tilt. Every tear from an unawakened partner validates the work. My tear, my pain is proof. My jaw locked so tight it ached. I scrolled. Dozens of similar messages, compliments about Serena's boundary setting, suggestions to shift shared assets into an individual sovereignty account, invitations to one-on-one energy clearings at $150 an hour. I opened the bank's website in a new tab. Another withdrawal, $312, labeled OCK-FEM Resource Pack, dated yesterday. I snapped photos of everything with my phone. Email threads, invoices, the Ascension Tier brochure featuring Arden's airbrushed face haloed by lotus petals. I kept scrolling until I hit a folder named Phoenix Rise Plan. Inside, a 12-step PDF explaining how to exit patriarchal partnerships while preserving resources for personal expansion. Step 4, advised transferring half of joint savings into a private account to prevent masculine sabotage. Step 7, encouraged documenting a partner's negative reactions as proof of emotional oppression. A pit opened under my ribcage. I realized I was living inside an instruction manual for abandonment. Some part of me, maybe the engineer, remained calm enough to mask my tracks. I closed tabs, eased down the lid, and sat back, hands trembling. If I confronted her on the spot, Arden's playbook predicted I'd get labeled controlling. Worse, each protest would feed the narrative that I was the problem. Lesson number 1 for anyone in a similar storm: reacting without evidence lets manipulation frame you as the villain. Documentation matters. That evening I suggested takeout and a movie. Serena agreed but spent dinner darting looks at her phone. Halfway through the film she left to prep for circle meditation, a phrase that now translated to Zoom meeting with Arden. I waited until the door clicked shut, then opened the banking app on our TV screen, figured she'd notice me on my phone. A new charge rolled in live, $997 OCK-FEM Circle Premium. My chest tightened like a seized bearing. I switched off the TV, called it a night, and lay awake counting ceiling fan rotations. Around 1 a.m., Serena slipped into bed smelling of incense and lavender. I whispered into the dark, "Did you buy something tonight?" A pause then. "Just resources for my growth." My voice wavered despite me. "You spent $1,000. She inhaled sharply, defensive walls rising. "Money is energy, Miles. I'm investing in our future." I nearly laughed. Our future she was actively dismantling, but I bit down hard on anger. Another lesson: timing is everything. Confront too soon, and you end up wrestling emotions instead of facts. The next morning, I used my phone's hotspot in the company parking lot to pull statements, screenshots, and Arden's entire PDF into a secret folder on my cloud drive. I even recorded a voice memo describing dates, amounts, and Serena's behavior, in case my memory blurred under stress. Digital breadcrumbs, insurance for whatever showdown loomed. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't discovering the money drain. It was the emotional math of realizing someone else, the smooth-talking Arden, knew my wife's daily thoughts better than I did. She'd begun quoting this stranger as gospel, while my opinions registered as outdated software. That imbalance breeds a special kind of loneliness, like being the ghost in your own marriage. If any of you have felt replaced by an algorithm, a friend group, or an ideology, share how you coped. Someone scrolling the comments might need that roadmap tonight. Friday arrived with a fresh strain. Serena deleted our shared Spotify playlists and started blasting droning binaural goddess tones through the house. Even my dog, okay, technically our rescue mutt Pippin, paced nervously at the sound. I grabbed my gym bag and left early, bench-pressed anger into the barbell until my arms quivered. Somewhere between reps the decision surfaced: gather proof, protect finances, and prepare an exit strategy. Not because I wanted out, but because staying without agency felt like volunteering for slow-motion humiliation. Yet guilt stalked me the entire drive home. Marriage vows don't come with a return policy. They promise weathering storms. Was I abandoning ship too soon? Then I pictured Serena's face, lit by laptop glow, nodding along to Arden's instructions to reframe my sadness as proof of toxic masculinity. My pulse steadied. Protecting yourself from a grift isn't abandonment, it's self-respect. Back home, she greeted me with distant politeness, then retreated to journal. I noticed the MacBook power cord snaking under the closed office door. Her silhouette flickered inside, head bent, shoulders slumped, an image equal parts monk and hostage. For a second, empathy almost outweighed anger. She was prey in a well-baited trap. I raised a knuckle to knock, lowered it, and walked away. Because compassion doesn't require you to stand still while someone's sinking your boat. Later that night, I made popcorn, poured 2 bowls, and carried one to the office like a peace offering. I knocked gently. "Movie snack." Silence. The door cracked open 2 inches. Serena's eyes looked glassy. "I can't break focus right now." She shut the door again. As footsteps retreated, I caught a phrase through the wood. "Remember sovereignty first." Arden's baritone echoing from her speakers. I sat on the couch alone, untouched bowl beside me, and confronted the final lesson of that week. Trust is a joint account. Insufficient funds withdrawals lead to closure. Serena had emptied hours faster than any bank statement could show. I wish I could wrap this section with a tidy moral, but real life keeps rolling. By Sunday, I'd booked an appointment with a lawyer friend and set a calendar reminder to open a new bank account on payday. The next phase would demand strategy, not raw emotion. Still, one question gnawed at me. Was there any version of Serena still reachable beneath Arden's scripts? Let me know. If you'd uncovered all this, would you fight to reclaim the person you loved or cut losses early? Drop your verdict. I read every comment. As I powered off the lights that night, sage and lavender faint on the air, a final thought struck me cold. Sometimes villains don't kick down the door. They slip through Wi-Fi, wearing enlightenment like a disguise. And when that happens, the real battle isn't saving the castle. It's convincing the entranced queen she's already safe. I woke up Monday with a decision that felt like steel behind my ribs. This was the week I reclaimed my life. No drawn-out ultimatums, no more begging Serena to log off a stranger's live stream, just facts, paperwork, and one suitcase at a time. If you've ever hit that point where action outruns emotion, let me know below. Was it empowering, terrifying, or both? First step was money, because love may run on feelings, but leaving runs on funds. I took an early lunch and sat in my car outside the bank, rain peppering the windshield. My pulse hammered while the teller opened a brand new personal checking account. Switching my direct deposit felt like treason. Still, each signature steadied me. I left the branch lighter, as though every dollar redirected back to me peeled away a layer of helplessness. Next came evidence. That night, while Serena hosted another webcam sovereignty circle, I copied every charge, email, screen grab, and Arden PDF into a password-protected file. I even recorded a quick video of myself narrating the timeline, dates, amounts, and Serena's escalating detachment, just in case memories blurred later. Pro tip: if you ever find yourself in similar chaos, document first, confront later. Paper trails don't raise voices. Tuesday, I called my buddy Liam, who flips properties downtown. By Thursday afternoon, he'd shown me a loft with exposed brick, big windows, and 0 incense residue. I signed the lease on the spot, scheduled movers for Saturday, and felt a jolt of guilt that dissipated almost as fast as it came. Staying put meant watching my marriage drown by inches. Moving out meant at least one of us could breathe. I handled loose threads with the precision of an engineer debugging code. Utilities, transferred, car insurance, split policies, streaming accounts, new passwords. I even pulled my favorite cast iron skillet from the kitchen cabinet, a practical keepsake my grandmother had seasoned for decades. Everything else I was ready to leave behind. Serena, meanwhile, floated deeper into the circle. She started wearing a moon-shaped pendant that Arden sold on her site, $50 for nickel-plated symbolism, and renamed our Wi-Fi Goddess Gateway. We barely spoke except for her clipped reminders that she had ascension calls each night. The physical distance between us at the dinner table could have held a second table. Friday evening, I waited until she headed out for a sound bath workshop, then unfolded 2 cardboard wardrobe boxes in the bedroom. I packed clothes, favorite books, and my grandfather's watch, moving in deliberate silence. Pippin tilted his head, sensing the shift. I scratched behind his ears and promised I visit. Dogs understand more than we think. The goodbye letter took 3 drafts. Version 1 was pure anger, lots of capital letters, lots of you did this. Version 2 slid too far into apology, as if I were the one abandoning vows. The final draft landed somewhere between, steady, factual, impossible to misinterpret. Serena, you asked for space from physical intimacy. I'm giving you a wider space, a pause on this marriage. I've moved out and secured my portion of our finances. The mortgage is covered through next month, so you're not stranded. In the envelope, you'll find copies of emails and invoices showing how Arden Reeves and the Circle have positioned me as your adversary and extracted over $4,000 from our joint account. My lawyer will reach out with next steps. If you choose to disengage from the Circle and seek real counseling, my number hasn't changed. If not, please respect this boundary. Miles. I placed the letter beside a neat stack of printouts, Arden's glowing sales pitches, donation receipts, and that Phoenix Rise Plan PDF with highlights on the phrases about siphoning assets. Then I clipped Pippin's spare key to the stack. She'd need someone loyal around. At dawn on Saturday, I loaded the last box into the mover's truck. Leaving a house at sunrise feels like sneaking away from your own life. The lawn was silvered with dew, and the street was still except for the rumble of the engine. I walked room to room one final time, touching the doorway where we'd measured each other's height, the scuffed baseboard from our first attempt at assembling furniture. None of it felt like mine anymore. My new loft smelled of fresh paint and possibilities. I set up the bed frame, plugged in the modem, and let ESPN play to fill the echo. By that evening, I hung the watch on a nail above the desk, a tiny anchor in a sea of empty wall. Exhaustion hit, but behind it pulsed a strange, quiet exhilaration. I had taken decisive action instead of bleeding out in confusion. Day 1 of solitude tasted like strong coffee and freedom. I jogged along the river, grabbed tacos from a food truck, and answered texts from friends who hadn't heard from me in months. "Game night Wednesday?" Liam asked. I thumbed back a quick yes before overthinking. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The preview read simply, "Please call me, Serena." The next buzz came an hour later from the same unfamiliar number, then a third. I turned off notifications. Part of reclaiming peace is choosing when to listen and when not to. By Monday morning, my lawyer had filed separation papers and sent them to Serena's email. At 2:03 p.m., my cell lit up with a Florida area code. Arden's voice was even silkier live than in the recordings. "Miles, I sense deep pain in your aura. Let's talk about your triggers." I almost laughed. "We have nothing to discuss," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Please remove my number." She launched into a pitch about transformative couples work, but I cut in. "Continued contact will be considered harassment. Goodbye." As I hung up, a weight slid off my shoulders, boundaries enforced in real time. That night, Serena called again, this time using her regular cell. I answered, mostly to prevent surprise appearances at my door. Her voice was small, shaky. "I got your letter." Silence stretched. I realized she was crying. A month ago, I might have rushed to comfort. Now I waited. "Everything feels wrong," she whispered. "Arden says that discomfort means growth, but I think I messed up." I replied carefully, "I'm not celebrating any of this, Serena, but I couldn't keep playing the villain in someone else's script." She started to apologize, words tumbling, but I stopped her. "I need time. When you're ready to talk with a licensed therapist present, let me know." She breathed a ragged okay before hanging up. The calls slowed after that, replaced by long texts at odd hours, snippets of regret, half-formed realizations about manipulation, screenshots of her canceling Circle subscriptions. I read them but didn't reply. Healing isn't a dialogue when one side's still patching leaks. Midweek, I hit the gym and found focus sliding back into my muscles. Benching iron instead of anger is underrated therapy. Afterward, the locker room TV aired a segment on online empowerment scams. I recognized Arden's face on the screen, that same pearly smile, as reporters described her formation of revenue streams through unregulated coaching. A court order froze her accounts pending investigation. I snapped a photo of the broadcast, not out of schadenfreude, well, maybe a little, but as proof that intuition paired with evidence had been right all along. Back at the loft, I set the phone down and noticed how quiet my thoughts sounded without constant defensive calculations. That's when lesson number one of this new life clicked. Boundaries aren't walls that keep people out. They're bridges you only lower for travelers who respect the toll. 3 days passed before Serena tried again, this time via a thoughtfully written email. She'd closed all Circle memberships, refunded what she could, and scheduled sessions with a counselor who had no merch store or mystical tears. She ended with a single line, "I'm working on myself, not selling a new version of me." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I forwarded the message to my attorney. Transparency is another form of self-defense, and went for a walk along riverside paths lit by golden street lamps. I asked myself a question I'll ask you now. When trust shatters, can it ever be welded back, or does the crack remain no matter how skilled the repair? Drop your take. I still don't know my answer. Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. Serena stood there holding a small box and looking less manufactured, hair natural, eyes puffy but clear. She handed me the package without stepping inside. "I found these while cleaning." Inside lay Polaroids from our first road trip and the ticket stub from a concert where we danced in the rain. She'd labeled the top photo we were real. For a breath, I said nothing. The air between us was fragile glass. Finally, I nodded. "Thank you," she swallowed. "I won't keep you, I just wanted to return what's yours." She turned to leave, then paused. "If you decide conversation is possible, name the terms, I'll meet them." No pleading, no guilt laced through the words, just an offering. She walked away, shoulders hunched but moving under her own power. I closed the door and sank onto the sofa, box in my lap, city noises drifting through the window. Maybe forgiveness was a longer game than I had patience for today. Maybe it would never arrive. But I'd learned something priceless. Dignity doesn't require mutual agreement, only personal commitment. I'd chosen myself without vilifying her, and that choice echoed like steady drumbeats in my chest. So here, where I leave you for now. If you've ever had to walk away to protect your peace, was it worth the loneliness that followed? And if someone you love fell under a manipulator's spell, did you wait at the edge or chart your own path? Your stories matter. Share them below. Someone scrolling at 2 a.m. might find the courage they need in your words, the same way I found mine in the stark lines of a bank statement and the quiet resolve of a sunrise drive toward freedom. The email from Serena's new therapist arrived on a rainy Thursday morning, wedged between a shipping confirmation and a coupon for car tires. Subject line, "Possible restorative session, no pressure." I stared at it while steam rose from my coffee. 3 weeks had passed since she'd returned the Polaroids, and aside from a few polite texts about paperwork, silence had ruled. In that quiet, I'd built routines, early workouts, Sunday pickup basketball, Wednesday game nights, habits stitched together like patches over a torn quilt. Life felt lighter, but a raw spot lingered where partnership used to be. So I read the email twice before deciding I could at least listen. The office was a converted Victorian, cozy, lots of plants, faint lavender instead of choking sage. Dr. Patel ushered us into armchairs angled just enough to face each other without full confrontation. Serena looked different from our last doorstep meeting, healthier color, less tension around the eyes. She clasped a reusable water bottle with both hands, a nervous tell. I offered a small nod. She returned one, eyes shiny but steady. Dr. Patel began with ground rules, speak from personal truth, no interruptions, permission to pause. Then she asked what brought us there. Serena exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a month. "I want to acknowledge the harm I caused," she started, voice thin. "Not just with money, but with the way I let strangers define you in my mind." I kept my arms loose on the chair rests. Defensive posture wouldn't help. "Hearing you say that matters," I admitted, because for weeks I felt like a fictional villain in someone else's story. Serena nodded, tears sliding. "Arden created an echo chamber. I craved belonging so much I surrendered critical thought. When you left, the silence was deafening enough for me to hear my own doubts." She described the aftermath. Her credit card frozen, Arden's account seized, dozens of women forming a class action claim. "The forums are full of partners comparing notes. It's surreal." Dr. Patel asked how I'd felt during the spiral. I chose honesty. I swung between anger and grief. Mostly, I felt erased. Every memory we shared was rewritten as oppressive, and any pain I voiced proved their narrative. Serena wiped her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought enlightenment required burning everything familiar. I couldn't see I was the one holding the match." She slid an envelope across the coffee table, bank statements showing refunds for most of the Circle payments and a check for the remainder. I didn't reach for it yet. Gestures matter, but time will test integrity. Dr. Patel steered us toward next steps. Did we want reconciliation, co-parenting of the dog, or amicable closure? I spoke first. I'm open to a slow path toward trust, but only if it stays anchored in reality. Licensed therapy, mutual finances transparent, no secret gurus. Serena agreed, adding she'd committed to a 12-week cognitive behavioral program addressing susceptibility to coercive communities. It felt concrete, not performative. After the session, we walked to the parking lot together. Gray clouds hung low, puddles reflected tree branches like fractured glass. Serena stopped beside my car. Could we grab coffee sometime, just conversation, no expectations? I thought of the Polaroid labeled we were real, and the loft waiting with stacked cardboard I still hadn't unpacked. Maybe, I said, but I need space to see if my heart stays settled or starts scanning for exits. She accepted that without protest, which told me change was genuine, or at least gaining traction. Back in the loft, I pinned the refund receipt to a corkboard beside gym schedules and court summons for Arden. The board had become my visual ledger. Physical proof life could be audited, repaired, improved. Yet some nights, lying under industrial-style ceiling beams, I'd replay good memories and wonder whether they belonged to someone else entirely. Healing, I realized, is less like flipping a switch and more like tuning a stubborn radio. Static, clarity, then static again. A week later, I was mid-set at the gym when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Online, awakened feminine circle founder arrested for fraud, unlicensed counseling. The article listed charges: wire fraud, false medical claims, tax evasion. Arden's mugshot looked eerily serene, as if she still believed the universe owed her bail. I forwarded the link to Serena with no comment. She replied minutes later, "I'm testifying for the prosecution. Thank you for giving me room to choose integrity." That night, Liam hosted poker. Between hands, he asked if I'd take Serena back. The table quieted, chips paused mid-shuffle. I answered honestly, "I don't know. Forgiveness is a decision, trust is a timeline." The guys nodded, each carrying his own version of re-earned confidence. Saturday morning, Serena texted an invite to a group meeting she was organizing for ex-Circle members and their partners. Focus on restitution and psychological education. I declined the larger event, but offered to help vet resources. Together, we compiled a list of licensed therapists, financial advisories, and critical thinking workshops. Collaborating without romance felt strange yet satisfying, proof we could coexist without defaulting to couplehood. A few evenings later, she dropped by the loft with a canvas grocery bag. Inside, Pippin's favorite blanket I'd forgotten, my signed copy of a sci-fi novel, and a handwritten note, returning what's yours and what reminds me to honor boundaries. She stepped back into the hallway without expectation. I thanked her, noticing how natural her voice sounded stripped of jargon. I kept the momentum of self-growth too. Took a photography class, joined a nonprofit hackathon, booked a solo weekend trip to Denver just because mountains felt like a clean exhale. On the flight home, I reread our wedding vows saved on my phone. They still rang true about support, laughter, honesty, promises worth keeping, but only if both people guard them. When Serena and I finally met for coffee, the shop was half empty, early morning light slanting through dusty windows. She ordered herbal tea instead of oat milk ceremonial cacao, progress in my book. Conversation flowed cautiously, how therapy was forcing her to confront childhood perfectionism, how my loft plants kept dying because I forgot to water them, how we'd each blocked Arden's remaining disciples on social media. I asked what she missed most about our old life. She said the sense that home was a place, not a debate. I admitted I missed random Tuesday evenings when her laugh filled the hallway unfiltered by ideology. We ended with a handshake that lingered a second too long, neither of us labeling the feeling. Outside, autumn had painted the maples gold. She waved, walked to her car, and I realized the knot in my stomach, once a constant, had loosened. Not gone, but no longer strangling. Legal separation remained in effect, neither rushed to cancel. We scheduled bi-weekly therapy, not couples counseling yet, just parallel paths in the same building. In those sessions, I unearthed my own blind spots, people-pleasing tendencies, a fear of rocking the boat that let red flags blend into Dacre. The therapist reminded me boundaries aren't ultimatums, they're agreements you make with yourself first. Months blurred into winter. Serena and I exchanged holiday cards but spent Christmas apart. She volunteered at a women's shelter. I skied with coworkers. New Year's Eve, I popped champagne with friends on a rooftop, and as fireworks sparked over the river, I felt gratitude outweigh grief. The past year had detonated illusions, but the debris had cleared sightlines I didn't know existed. January brought a mediation date to finalize either reconciliation steps or the divorce path. On the morning of the meeting, we bumped into each other outside the courthouse, breath clouding in the cold. She tucked hair behind her ear, an old habit, and said, "Whatever we decide today, thank you for drawing a line when I couldn't see one." I replied, "Thank you for stepping back over it with your eyes open." We smiled, a little sad but steady. Inside, paperwork waited. We'd prepared 2 packets, one to dissolve our marriage amicably, another to pause proceedings for a year of monitored counseling. We sat with our attorneys, exchanged glances, and almost simultaneously reached for the second folder. Was it hope? Maybe, more like a controlled experiment, attempt rebuilding on foundation reinforced with truth, audits, and professional guidance. Leaving the courthouse, Serena asked if I'd join her and Pippin at the dog park later. "No relationship talk," she promised. "Just fetch." I hesitated, then said yes, because forgiving someone doesn't guarantee future happiness, but refusing to even test the soil guarantees nothing will grow. That afternoon, Pippin bounded between us, muddy paws splattering jeans as if campaigning for neutrality. We laughed, actual unscripted laughter, and for a moment the fractured timeline stitched together, not erased, not perfected, but acknowledged. The sun dipped behind leafless trees, and Serena tossed the ball again. Pippin launched after it with his whole heart, eyes fixed on the horizon. I stood there thinking about lessons I'd carry forward. Guard your curiosity, it can be hijacked. Love people, not personas. When ideology demands you sacrifice empathy, walk away. But the biggest takeaway was simpler. Self-respect is non-negotiable, yet choosing it doesn't mean shutting doors forever. Sometimes it means installing a peephole, a sturdy lock, and deciding case by case who steps inside. So that's where I'll pause for now. Our story isn't wrapped with a bow because real life rarely sticks to neat runtimes. Maybe we'll reconcile fully, maybe we'll part as allies who once shared a chapter. Either way, the pen is back in my hand and the next page starts blank, not scripted by someone selling ascension. If you've made it this far, tell me, where in your life do you need to reclaim the pen, and what's the first sentence you'll write? Someone scrolling through comments at midnight might borrow your courage, just like I borrowed a stranger's in an old forum when my world first tilted off axis. Share it. Let's keep each other grounded in stories that belong to us and only us.